I'm Andy with Competitive Cyclist, and this is Dura Ace 7900. When Dura Ace 7800 hit the streets several years back, it was revolutionary. The shifting was telepathic, the new pewter chrome finish was stunning, and the 7800 crankset established a new standard for crank design that was copied by everyone. With the introduction of the new 7900 group, it feels a little like Shimano's less of an innovator and more of a follower. They finally added some carbon fiber to the mix. They finally hidden all the cables under the bar tape. And like Campy and SRAM, they finally pierced a few holes in their chains. However, when you look closely, reflect a bit on the recent history of bicycle componentry, and think about it for a second, you'll notice that throughout the years when the mad scientists at Shimano rolled up their sleeves, it was never really a reverse engineering of the components of their competition. And really, the new Dura Ace groups over the years have never been a complete reinvention of their predecessors. Rather, the Dura Ace group has always felt, to me, like more of a forward engineering or a calculated improvement on the Gruppo that came before. So that's really what Dura Ace 7900 is. They took an industry benchmark of a product, which was Dura Ace 7800, and managed to make it better in a big way without starting from scratch. History has taught us that when Shimano innovates, they set the standards and the expectations by which all other components are measured. That's why this new version of Dura Ace is such a big deal. It will be the gold standard against which all other brands will be compared to for years to come. Obviously, the most notable change is that of the finish of the Gruppo. Like the newest version of their XTR group, 7900 has a two-tone finish which consists of a charcoal matte gray highlighted with sections of beautifully polished aluminum with a slight gloss to it. I'm not sure if the anodized gray is meant to be functional or just a good aesthetic complement to the carbon fiber they've added to the levers and rear derailleur. Either way, when you see it in person for the first time, it's simply breathtaking. With that, let's dive in and take a closer look at exactly how Shimano has changed each piece of the new group, starting with the STI levers. Since there are so many technical changes to the shifters, I'll summarize them for you in a few bullet points. The brake and shift cable routing is now finally completely hidden under the handlebar tape. The reach of the levers can be adjusted fore and aft, which allows you to customize the distance from the bar to the lever, which is big news for riders who have smaller hands. The stroke distance of the right lever has been decreased by 20% to achieve faster shifting with less hand motion and strength. And the pivot of the lever has been moved to enhance braking modulation. Brake levers we have here use unidirectional carbon. It'll be interesting to see which type of carbon the final production models have, woven or unidirectional. I've seen pictures of both. The overall shape of the lever has also been tweaked to accommodate a wider range of hand shapes and give easier, more comfortable access to the levers. To me, this ergonomic remodel is huge. I'm a hardcore Dura Ace fan, have been for some time, and I've always wondered why the 7800 levers were so much thinner through here than the 7700s. The 7900 levers are also generally wider than the 7800s. The net effect is this: these levers will fit more hands more easily than the 7800s. If your preference is for the flatter and fatter hoods of Campy Ergo Power, you'll be surprised to find that these levers are equally comfortable. And after all these modifications, they managed to shave 40 grams off the weight of these levers. Moving on to the rear derailleur, you'll notice that the pulley cage is carbon fiber, but what you don't see is that it's 16 grams lighter than the 7800 model, and the chain wrap capacity has been increased to accommodate a compact crank with a rear cog as large as 28 teeth. They've also increased the material at the pivots, much like they did with the new XTR rear derailleur. My guess is that this improves overall stiffness of the derailleur and thus provides quicker, crisper shifts between cogs. Another interesting detail is the addition of a pin between the cage and the pulleys. I'm not sure why it's there, but again, my guess is that it provides added stiffness to enhance shifting and perhaps a touch of durability to prevent damage to the carbon cage, which could also be the reason they went with unidirectional carbon on this piece as well. Okay, so on to cranks, where Shimano is once again setting the standard for others to follow with the new 7900 and 7950 cranksets. The aluminum version of this crank weighs in at 725 grams, including a bottom bracket. That's lighter than just about every carbon crankset on the market, and the new Holotech chain rings follow the design of the XTR crank by using hollow channels in the big ring for decreased weight, and added stiffness. All of this combines to make the new crank 20% stiffer than the 7800 crank. The lower weight, again, is achieved by thinning the walls of the crank and creating the hollow cord big ring. All I can say is wow. I mean, seriously, check out the offset of the spider and the chain ring. That's cool. In order to improve shifting up front, as if that were possible, the ramping and milling of the chain rings work in concert with the new super narrow chain and redesigned front derailleur to eliminate chain rub even in the most extreme gears. The changes to the front derailleur, which are a redesigned cage profile and linkage, combine with the new chain rings to ensure no trimming will be required. That's right, no more fine tuning of the left lever when you're mashing away at the 5325. Just shift it and forget it. Shimano also optimized the spring tension of the front derailleur to reduce shifting force required to move between chain rings. Some have even said that this is a bigger improvement in shifting than the rear. And when you compare it to the 7800 and the new XTR front derailleur, you can see that they've beefed up the upper half once again, most likely to provide more solid platform for moving the cage in between the chain rings. Now, onto the cassette. The construction of the cassette isn't dramatically changed. Shimano has fine-tuned the facings of the cogs to better mate with the new super narrow chain and added a new aluminum cog carrier to reduce weight by 10 grams overall. But what has changed about the cassettes is the available ratios. You can now add an 1125, an 1127, and an 1128 Shimano Dura Ace 7900 cassette to your arsenal. And the new rear derailleur design ensures that the chain wrap will be right even if you use these gear combinations with the 7950 compact crank. When this Gruppo arrives today, the crankset was a real eye-catcher, the shifters were a real eye-catcher, but perhaps the most notable change aside from those two is the new super narrow chain. It's changed in little ways, but it kind of makes a big difference. It has hollow pins and perforated plates to further reduce the weight of the chain. The outside plates have been redesigned to reduce chain suck, while the inside plates have been modified to reduce drivetrain friction. The design of the chain, therefore, is actually asymmetrical. One side of the chain is perforated, the other is solid. The hollow pins and plates make the chain 18 grams lighter than the 7801 chain and provide a measured reduction in mechanical drag. And finally, this is really cool news. Shimano will be introducing their very own version of the Quick Link, which requires no tools for installation and removal. So, since all this new gear is going to make you faster, you'll need better brakes, right? Of course. Well, Shimano answers that call by updating their brakes as follows. They've revised the arches of the caliper to improve overall braking power and modulation. They've been machined like crazy, which is a new technique for Shimano, to eliminate weight and, in my opinion, dramatically improve their sex appeal. They're even chromed like an old steel bike where the shoe bolts meet the caliper arm, which is kind of nice and classic touch. The new barrel adjuster is oversized but not gigantic to allow for easy micro adjustments on the fly if you happen to womp a rim out of true. The cable stop has a lower profile that improves cable routing and decreases cable drag, thus improving the snappiness of the lever. You also get a new compound on the stock pads. It's going to double your stopping power in the wet and provide a dramatic improvement in braking and modulation in dry conditions. Lastly, there's additional titanium hardware thrown in, which reduces the overall weight to 293 grams per pair, which is 10 grams lighter than the 7800 brakes. Aside from the obvious aesthetic improvements, like the two-tone finish, which is killer, the Holotech crank and chain rings, which are space-age beautiful, the brakes, which design-wise I think outshine my zero gravities, Shimano's finally addressed several of the issues our customers have been raising for years. They've given us a compact crank option. They've allowed for reach adjustment on the levers. They've lowered the overall weight of the Gruppo. They've increased the available gear ratios big time. And finally, for the love of all that's holy, they've routed the cables under the bar tape. It's apparent that Shimano has finally cast aside its design ethic of giving the pros what they want and has started listening to the people who actually pay their bills, the legion of card-carrying members of USA Cycling and road enthusiasts like you and me. At long last, Shimano has given us many of the things we've been asking for years and has executed them in a Gruppo that is poised to perform beyond our wildest expectations. All I can say to Shimano is thank you and I cannot wait to buy my new 7900 Gruppo. Thanks for taking the time to watch this review. I know it's been a long one. And if you have any questions about Dura Ace 7900, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email at andy@competitivecyclist.com.